Wow, Mary and Alex, that I wish we could put that in a box because it'll probably be surpass anything I get under my tree this year. What a fabulous musical excursion that the two of you took us on, and Mendelssohn, a son of a rabbi, certainly had a lot of things to say in his short life, and so well, virtuously delivered this morning. Just what a blessing. And I'm sorry to say that I have to actually follow that up with talking. So, our scripture this morning comes from 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18. Therefore, do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. It is so weird because after listening to what we just played, I do not feel like I'm wasting away. But I do realize that I am being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Boy, yes, just that music is totally rendering the scripture almost useless. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what on is unseen. And I guess what you heard this morning is unseen as well. But we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, yet what is unseen is eternal. Thus endeth the reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Now, shortly after Election Day, my usually cheerful Facebook feed, one I've carefully curated to showcase pet videos, vacation photos, daily sketches from one friend, nature, my trusty Facebook feed, it took a hard turn. And for a brief period, thankfully, but suddenly there were lots of feelings. Understandable, but two posts from friends especially jumped out at me. The first, clearly it's every man for themselves now. Declared the other, America will never recover from this. And I didn't respond to either, but when I read them with my minister's eyes, I immediately saw that while these two may have been locked in some form of faith, and faith is not a monolith, but locked into some form of faith, both were wholly devoid of hope. And how can that be? Because, don't faith and hope go hand in hand? Hope being the first spiritual element of Advent, doesn't it precede faith? Maybe? Now, this is the third time I've actually stood before you and given a sermon on hope during Advent. The first, I checked my notes, was in 2013, and yet here I stand, still unable to lock down this thing called hope. And I think that's wonderful because while faith is pretty much locked down, hope remains open. Now, Bill Sander was here last month giving a session on Akashic Records, and he reminded us that words, language, even when we don't understand them, still have potent energy. And without delving into etymology this morning, I realize the same goes for those two words, faith and hope. Even if we don't understand them, speaking them has an impact on our physiology. Go ahead, say them back and forth with me a few times. Faith, hope. Faith, hope. Again, faith, hope. Faith. How does that fit in your mouth, on your face, in your body? Say it again. Faith. Now hope. Hope. Again, now I experience each word like this. Faith, hope. Faith, hope. Now, putting these attributes into physical action, faith is something you can charge forward with, and hope remains open and receptive. Saying hope somehow feels hopeful. Now, last month, I was incredibly moved by the obituary of Dr. Janelle Getchis, founder of the charity hospital Christ House here in Washington, D.C. Back in 1975, the story goes, she and her husband, a Methodist minister, had accepted an assignment in Pakistan to serve as medical missionaries. But first, they had a short stay here in Washington, D.C. to get their visas. But the pair were so overwhelmed by the conditions of the homeless people here in the nation's capital, especially the profound lack of accessible medical care for them. And Dr. Getchis realized that her calling would not be in Pakistan, but here in the U.S. Capitol. In the following year, she, her husband, and their children moved to Washington, D.C. She would later tell the Chicago Tribune, "In Africa, I saw profound poverty, but still the people were hopeful. In America, we're seeing a different kind of poverty. The homeless we see in the shelters are faces of despair. They've been battered down so often that they're broken spiritually." So when we examine hope as a spiritual condition, especially against the other Advent themes of peace, joy, and love, hope remains elusive. We speak of peace, we immediately pray for world peace. We strive for inner peace. Joy, we have cause for joy. We share joy. People, places, and things give us joy. And love, it's something we do in its many forms. We feel it. We long to be on the receiving end of it. But this curious thing called hope, unfixed and hard to spot, it manages to lift us up and move us along. Now, referring back to our scripture, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, yet what is seen is eternal. Now, I'll share a personal story that also hits me personally about the change and transition, because there's a lot of unknowns. I'm a federal employee, and there's a lot of unknowns about what's going to happen to my federal employee. There's been a lot of chatter on the internet from some different candidates have plans for what to do with federal employees. And I found myself feeling anxious and really worried. And even though it was months away, I still didn't know what to do. And a friend of mine who has the good fortune of being quite independently wealthy said, "You need to have a plan B." And I thought, well, I'm 58 years old. There's not a lot of plan Bs I'm going to be able to invite myself in. But I immediately texted back, "But you will find me delving more deeply into my metaphysical faith." And I realized, without thinking, in my own sense of self-care, that I was going to work on that part of myself that is not necessarily seen. I couldn't have necessarily locked my faith into what was going to happen to my future as far as my employment goes, my financial circumstances, whether I get to work at home or not, or I'm forced to get back in my car, which I did for decades anyways. All those things I had no control over. But I realized that working on myself, focusing on, working on my highest self, that is the one project that was reliant on nobody, or reliant on anybody. And that actually restored a sense of hope, because I couldn't lock down anything in the future. I couldn't move forward on the unknown. But it restored a sense of hope. And that hope was rooted in myself and the work that I'm here on this planet to do to evolve spiritually and as a fellow human being. Now, I saw the Ralph Fiennes movie Conclave not too long ago, and tucked away among all the wonderful moments in that film was this jewel of dialogue from one of the cardinals. "We must be wary of certainty, because certainty bars us from the great mystery, which in turn bars us from the infinite possibility of hope." Let me repeat that. We must be wary of certainty, because certainty bars us from the great mystery, which in turn bars us from the infinite possibility of hope. Now, metaphysically, Advent is a time to prepare ourselves as a birthplace for a nascent Christ consciousness. We are basically, at this moment, considering ourselves Bethlehem in human form. We need to be the cradle for Christ consciousness, starting internally, inner work, so that it can manifest itself communally. And if it starts with that most fundamental type of hope for oneself, not our circumstances, but the fundament of who and what we truly are, that divine aspect of ourselves which has always been and will always be in times of certainty and uncertainty. Fix your eyes upon that, for that is eternal.